This is a brand new Jameson whiskey. It's a single pot still whiskey. It comes in at 46% ABV and it uses Irish oak in the maturation. Is that all too good to be true? Let's find out in this week's review. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and this is the Jameson Single Pot Still 5 Oak Cask release. So let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Now, first off, in terms of what makes this Jameson whiskey a bit special. So the standard Jameson, we're all familiar with it. It is a blended whiskey, a blend of grain whiskey and single pot still whiskey. This, however, is just single pot still whiskey. So single pot still, if you're not familiar with it, that's the style of whiskey that's unique to Ireland. It uses a mash bill of malted and unmalted barley. The malted barley gives you nice, rich kind of caramel, fruity notes, and the unmalted barley gives you some kind of floral notes, pepperiness, and really nice oiliness that helps single pot still whiskey deliver a lot of flavor. This single pot still whiskey is also a new core release from Jameson, which means it's going to be available all the time. It's not just a limited edition, special edition. This is batch 1 of 2022. Now that seems to me saying that they're going to have multiple batches in coming years. Now they might have 2 batches in 2023, maybe 3 or 4 batches in 2023, but it does say to me that they're going to have a lot more of this whiskey available because right now this is only available in Ireland. Now chances are it's going to find its way abroad, it's going to find its way to the States, to Canada, elsewhere in the world very soon, but right now it is only available to Ireland. If you want, you can wait for it to be available in your area, or there's going to be some shops in Ireland like the Celtic Whiskey Shop that do ship internationally. So if you want to get your hands on this whiskey, you can. Now, what are the 5 oak casks that go into making this whiskey special? Well, there's bourbon casks, sherry casks, and 3 types of virgin oak casks. There's American virgin oak, European virgin oak, and Irish virgin oak. So starting with the classics, we've got the bourbon and sherry. So bourbon is going to give you some nice kind of vanilla richness. It's going to give you a bit of spice, but mostly going to be delivering sweetness, caramel, fudginess, and richness like that. The sherry cask is going to deliver some fruitiness, maybe a touch of nuttiness, but also it's really going to lead in to the dried fruits like the plums, like raisins, like sultanas, and really nice kind of baking spices. And then we get to the 3 types of virgin oak cask used in the whiskey. So if you're not familiar with it, oak from different parts of the world will actually have different flavors that come through it, and they will give different flavors to a whiskey. So starting with American virgin oak, so American white oak, it has this really rich kind of sharp punchiness coming through it. You'll be familiar with a bourbon where it's got all those caramel, vanilla, kind of baking spices punching through, and it's got a really nice, strong, lively flavor that comes through, whereas European oak, particularly French oak, does deliver a much more of a lower end of spices. Think like cocoa powder, think kind of more baking spices but less of the cinnamon and more of a clove. Think of much kind of lower, more subtle flavors. Irish oak though is kind of different. So there aren't actually many forests in Ireland, and there are very few areas in Ireland that have trees old enough to produce wood to make barrels from. So it's kind of rare to see a whiskey aged in Irish oak. Irish oak gives this kind of same kind of profile as American oak with the vanilla and with a nice bit of baking spices, but the vanilla is less like the vanilla bean and more like a kind of a vanilla frosting. It's honeyed, it's rich, it's definitely a lot sweeter than the American oak and the European oak. So hopefully, and as you can tell, I know it, it does deliver a lot of new flavors into the whiskey that you might not be familiar with. And that is enough talking about the whiskey. I think we should go in for the nose. This is the Jameson Single Pot Still 5 Oak Cask. Cheers. Okay, right off the bat, I'm getting a really nice kind of oakiness that comes through, unsurprisingly, obviously from a 5 oak cask, but it's not just like the oak char you might get from some whiskies where you have that charred oak influence. It's almost like a tree sap, like the sap of a tree, like a pine sap coming through. It's kind of fresh, kind of reminds me of being in a forest. And there's a lot of caramel, vanilla, but the vanilla, it's not like a vanilla bean, it's not like that natural flavor. It's kind of like a fudgy, caramelly vanilla flavor coming through. Very nice and rich, but definitely like very sweet, very, very sweet. A lot of sweetness coming through from the wood and from the influence from all those casks. I'm also getting a lot of oak spice coming through, again, unsurprisingly. Like, there's some nice oak spiciness, but behind the oak spiciness, I'm getting some of the pot still spices. So generally pot still spiciness, you get this kind of maybe black pepper, maybe white pepper note coming through. It's there, but it's definitely behind those kind of oak spicy notes. There's also a touch of fruitiness, maybe like an apple that's been dipped in honey, like a really nice, it's very, very sweet up front, lots of spiciness, but balanced with all that sweetness coming through. So yeah, like a slice of an apple that's been dipped in a bit of honey, very nice, very sweet, and just delivering a very nice but relatively complex nose. Like, there's a lot to unpack in there. There's the tree sap, there's the influence from the oak, there's the influence from the sherry in the background. I wouldn't be able to pick out exactly where the sherry influence is, but you can tell that there's this kind of dried fruit kind of richness there behind the other notes, but definitely leading up front with that oakiness, with that sweetness. So let's go in for the palate. Cheers. Spicy, it's warm. There's some ginger spice coming through, a nice warming ginger spice coming through. There's a bit of dark chocolate as well, really nice richness coming through, almost a little drying on the palate on that first sip, but very nice, very rich, very densely flavored. Like, the spiciness, as it was in the palate, it was going almost from the oak spice into a peppery spice, very nice and very warming. Lots of vanilla, lots of baking spices, but I'm gonna go in for a second sip and see if I can unpack more of those baking spices. Cheers. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the mouthfeel on this whiskey. It is really, really dense. Like, it is syrupy almost. It's very honeyed, very rich, very thick, and that helps it deliver a load of flavors. So in there, I was also getting a little bit of orange peel. I'm getting kind of a cinnamony, nutmeggy clove. I'm getting really rich baking spices that come through from all those oak influences, and definitely getting a good bit of dark chocolate coming through, like really nice, rich, dark chocolate cocoa powder coming through. It's very good, and that mouthfeel makes it feel almost like an old-fashioned. It's not obviously as sweet as an old-fashioned, it's not as spicy as an old-fashioned, but it definitely has a really, really rich, dense texture that's delivering a lot of flavor. So I'm going to go in again, but I'm going to talk about the finish this time. Cheers. On the finish, the pot still oiliness is really evident. I've got this rich kind of mouth coating, dense, really rich flavor hanging on in my mouth, quite like a honey. The spiciness is there, the sweetness is there. I think the sweetness is fading faster, the spiciness is definitely lingering on. I'm getting a little bit of that kind of oak sap that I was getting on the nose that's come back. I think in the palate, it definitely took a step back behind the other notes, behind the sweetness, behind all those other rich notes. In the finish, as they fade away, that kind of tree sap note is almost coming back, quite floral and quite nice. I'd say it's got a medium long finish going on, like it's definitely delivering a lot of flavor. I've still got some of that honeyed sweetness going on, so even though there's a nice bit of oak, even though there's a nice bit of spiciness going on, it's not one dimensional. That sweetness is there, that sweetness is hanging on and delivering a nice bit of flavor to balance out all that spiciness. It's just got this nice, almost kind of like buttery, creamy note on the finish that is quite common in pot still whiskies, and this does deliver a very nice creamy note to kind of wrap everything up and let you go back in for another sip to go back in and find all those spicy notes. This whiskey is retailing at about the same price as Green Spot and as Redbreast 12, but it's only coming in at about 4 years old. However, I will note that this is 46% ABV, and it does have 5 different oak casks being used in it, one of which is very hard to find, Irish oak. So I think based on that, kind of the complexity that goes into it, the higher ABV than the Green Spot and the Redbreast, and the amount of flavor it does deliver, I think it is fairly priced, and I would recommend you keep an eye out for it. It will be available in your area eventually. If you can't wait, I'm sure there are shops online that will ship it to you, but it's a very, very nice whiskey. It's a core whiskey, so it will come out in your area eventually. And since it's a core whiskey, I'm very happy to see that this will be hanging around because it is a very, very nice whiskey. And I think that's all there is to say about the new Jameson Single Pot Still. It is a very nice whiskey. I'm definitely going to keep on enjoying this. If you've liked the review, make sure to scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews on Wednesdays and I put out cocktail recipes on Fridays, so make sure you hit subscribe. You'll get more videos like this, and I'll see you next time. Slán.